Have you ever wondered about the rich and complex history of Ukraine? Let's start at the beginning, with the ancient times when the land that is now Ukraine was inhabited by various Slavic tribes. These early settlers were the Eastern Slavs, who laid the foundation for the primary ethnic groups of Ukraine we recognize today. Now imagine a time when there were no defined borders, no countries as we know them today. The land was a patchwork of principalities, each with its own ruler and way of life. In the early Middle Ages, the region we now identify as Ukraine was divided into several principalities, some of which you may recognize from your history books: Kiev, Galicia, and Volhynia, to name a few. Among these, the Principality of Kiev, founded in the 9th century, was a force to be reckoned with. It soon became one of the most powerful principalities and an important cultural and commercial hub. Picture a bustling city, a center of trade, where ideas are exchanged as freely as goods. This was Kiev in its heyday, a beacon of prosperity and knowledge. These early principalities were more than just political entities. They were crucibles of culture and identity, where the unique Ukrainian ethnicity began to take shape. Customs were formed, traditions were passed down, and a shared history was etched into the collective memory. The Eastern Slavs and the principalities they formed were not isolated entities. They interacted, traded, and sometimes clashed with their neighbors. These interactions, whether peaceful or otherwise, influenced the development of the Ukrainian ethnic identity. It was a dynamic, ever-evolving process, shaped by both internal evolution and external influences. This early period in the history of Ukraine, from the arrival of the Eastern Slavs to the rise of the Eastern Principalities, was pivotal. It was during this time that the cultural and ethnic identity of Ukraine began to form. It's a testament to the resilience and adaptability of the Ukrainian people, who managed to carve out their unique identity in a region often caught in the crossfire of larger powers. This early period laid the foundation for the cultural and ethnic identity of Ukraine. It was a beginning that set the stage for the rich tapestry of events that would follow, shaping the Ukraine we know today. So, what happened when the Mongols invaded, and how did the Polish-Lithuanian rule impact Ukraine? In the 13th century, the Mongols, an East Central Asian ethnic group, set their sights on the fertile lands of Ukraine. With their advanced warfare tactics, the Mongols swiftly conquered the region, marking the beginning of a period known as the Tatar domination. This Mongol rule brought significant changes to the Ukrainian landscape, both politically and socially, as the Mongols imposed their own systems of governance and societal norms. However, the Mongols' rule was not destined to last forever. As the Mongol power waned, a new power dynamic began to take shape in western Ukraine. The Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania started to exert their influence over the region. This Polish-Lithuanian rule was characterized by a complex mix of cooperation and conflict. On one hand, the rule brought about certain benefits such as increased trade and cultural exchange. On the other hand, the Polish and Lithuanian rulers often imposed their own religious and cultural norms, leading to tensions with the Ukrainian population. As the Ukrainian people struggled under the yoke of foreign rule, they sought to preserve their distinct cultural identity and autonomy. This desire for self-determination led to a series of conflicts and uprisings against the Polish-Lithuanian rule. These uprisings were not mere flashpoints of resistance, but a testament to the enduring spirit of the Ukrainian people. Even as the Ukrainian landscape was shaped by the forces of the Mongol invasion and Polish-Lithuanian rule, the spirit of Ukrainian independence remained unbroken. The people of Ukraine continued to yearn for self-rule, a desire that would shape the course of their history in the centuries to come. Despite these challenges, the spirit of Ukrainian independence remained strong. Ever heard of the Cossacks and the Partition of Poland? Let's delve into that. The Cossacks, a group of semi-independent warriors, were a significant force in Ukrainian history. They were known for their fierce independence and military prowess, often clashing with both the Poles and the Russians as they sought autonomy for their lands. These warrior-like communities were renowned for their democratic and egalitarian social structure, quite a rarity during those times. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the Cossacks rose to prominence, becoming a law unto themselves. They established a semi-autonomous entity known as the Zaporozhian Host, where they elected their leaders, known as hetmans, in grand assemblies. The Cossacks, with their strong military tradition, often found themselves in conflict with neighboring powers, particularly the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the expanding Russian state. As the 18th century rolled in, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth began to crumble. Its decline culminated in what's known as the Partition of Poland. This was a series of 3 partitions that took place towards the end of the 18th century, effectively wiping the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth off the map. The Partition of Poland had significant implications for Ukraine. The lands that were once part of the Commonwealth, including a large part of western Ukraine, were divided among 3 major powers of the time: Russia, Prussia, and Austria. This division effectively split Ukraine into several parts, each under a different rule. In the Russian-controlled territories, Ukrainians faced cultural and political repression as the Russian Empire sought to assimilate them. Meanwhile, in the Austrian territories, Ukrainians had more freedom to maintain their culture and traditions. Despite these divergent experiences, the Ukrainian identity persisted, with the dream of a united Ukraine never far from the minds of its people. This period saw Ukraine divided, but the desire for a united Ukraine never faded. Next, we enter the era of the Russian Empire and the tumultuous times of World War I. As we delve into this chapter, we find Ukraine caught in the grip of the vast Russian Empire. From the late 18th century onward, much of eastern Ukraine was under Russian control. This period was marked by cultural and political repression, as the Ukrainian language, customs, and traditions were often suppressed in an attempt to Russify the population. This era was not all about subjugation, though. It also bore witness to a stirring sense of national consciousness among Ukrainians. There was a growing urge to reclaim their identity, their culture, and their autonomy. Then, the world was plunged into the chaos of the Great War, World War I. The war brought about seismic geopolitical shifts and created an opportunity for Ukraine to assert its independence. In the year 1917, amidst the turmoil of war and the Russian Revolution, Ukraine declared itself a free and sovereign nation. But independence was not easily won. No sooner had Ukraine declared its sovereignty than it was invaded by a host of powers. Soviet Russia, with its newly formed Red Army, was one of the main aggressors, seeking to bring Ukraine back under its control. Poland, too, desired a piece of the Ukrainian pie and launched its own incursions into the country. This was a time of great adversity for Ukraine. It had to fight on multiple fronts to protect its newfound freedom. Its people faced war, occupation, and immense hardship, but through it all, they held on to their dream of an independent Ukraine. And so, the flame of Ukrainian autonomy, ignited in the fires of war and revolution, continued to burn. It was a flame that was to be tested in the years to come, in the crucible of Soviet rule and beyond. But that's a story for the next scene. In spite of all odds, the flame of Ukrainian autonomy continued to burn. Finally, we reached the Soviet era and the journey towards independence. A significant chapter in Ukrainian history, the Soviet era, began in 1922. It was a period marked by swift industrialization, but it also brought with it immense hardships and repression. Among the most tragic episodes of this era was the Great Ukrainian Famine, known as the Holodomor, in the early 1930s. It was a man-made disaster that resulted from the Soviet Union's forced collectivization policies, leading to the deaths of millions of Ukrainians. The memory of the Holodomor remains a painful scar on the Ukrainian psyche, a stark reminder of the brutalities endured under Soviet rule. The Soviet regime sought to suppress Ukrainian culture and identity, imposing Russian language and Soviet ideals. However, Ukrainians clung to their heritage, their language, and their traditions, preserving their national identity against all odds. As we move towards the twilight of the Soviet era, the winds of change began to blow across Eastern Europe. The late 1980s saw the rise of popular movements advocating for greater autonomy and freedom, not just in Ukraine, but throughout the Soviet bloc. In 1991, following the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine seized the moment and declared its independence. It was a moment etched in history, a moment of triumph, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Ukrainian people. From then on, Ukraine embarked on its journey as a sovereign and democratic nation. It was not without its challenges, including political turmoil and territorial disputes. Yet the country persevered, navigating its own path in the world, driven by the aspirations of its people for a free and prosperous Ukraine. Through resilience, Ukraine emerged as a sovereign and democratic nation, navigating its own path in the world. This chapter is not the end of the story, but rather the beginning of a new one, a story that continues to unfold in the heart of Eastern Europe.